think there are some problems with the Mikado, and I'm going to tell you why. If you have been in an amateur dramatics show, you kind of have Gilbert and Sullivan to thank, because it wasn't until amateur groups started performing shows by Gilbert and Sullivan that they started being taken seriously. The success and social and cultural acceptance of amateur dramatics in the UK is to do with Gilbert and Sullivan and what they wrote. So as much as some of their material may be problematic, we have them to thank. And you've probably heard of some of their more popular works like HMS Pinafore, The Pirates of Penzance, and the show that I'm going to talk about today, The Mikado. So the Mikado came at a time where Japanese people were just starting to settle in the UK. The year before the Mikado was written, about 264 Japanese citizens were residing in the UK. Gilbert told a journalist that he had no good reason for setting the Mikado in Japan, but that it would let them do cute scenery and exotic looking backdrops and costumes. And the thing about the Mikado is it's not about Japan. It's not a Japanese story. It's a British story. It's a critique of the British government. And Gilbert used a foreign setting so that he could be even more critical of the UK. The point of the piece is to reflect British society. And for some reason, setting it in Japan was the best way to do that. And at the time, I get it. Maybe there weren't Japanese opera singers or actors or even people interested in performing Gilbert and Sullivan's work. Blackface, yellowface, it was all very much accepted. But I think even then they knew they were doing something not quite right, because in 1907, a prince from Japan came on a state visit to the UK, and the British government banned all performances of the Mikado because they were scared that it would cause offence. Lyrics to songs in the Mikado even had the N-word written in them. Now, those were references to minstrel shows, so they would have been references to white performers in blackface, but we know that that's still problematic in itself. And even though much into the 20th century, the use of the N-word was still widely accepted, the audience members objected its use in this opera, so much so that the opera directors had to reword it and take those words out. And those are the alterations that remain in the libretto today. Oh, and by the way, those alterations were made in 1948. So let's talk about yellowface for a second. Yellowface is the Asian version of blackface. I'm not going to have to explain to you what blackface is, but in case you didn't know, because I've spoken to people who haven't known, yellowface is when an actor changes their skin tone, adds prosthetics, does racially charged makeup, costuming, and hair in order to make themselves look like an Asian person, a person of Asian descent. We're talking Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese. The reason why it's offensive is because it spreads demeaning stereotypes over people who have no control over the way that they're being portrayed. Now, in historical photos of the Mikado, you will see people from all phases of time in yellowface. And you may look at these images and think, oh, but that's back then. That was okay back then. What would you say if I showed you these photos, which were taken last year? And musical theatre is no stranger to yellowface. Jonathan Pryce originated the role of a Vietnamese character in Miss Saigon and even won a Tony for it the same year that Lea Salonga became the first woman of Asian descent to win a Tony Award, and that was 1991. Japan is not relevant to the plot of the Mikado, and so some companies have tried to recontextualize it. English National Opera, for example, had no use of yellowface. It was not set in Japan. When you look at their marketing materials and footage from the show, there's no immediate sign that this could be something in Japan. It's the same with the Gilbert and Sullivan Players of New York. They recontextualized the show to be kind of an Italian Renaissance thing, with no damage done to the plot or the story. Remember, this is a satire of the British government at the time, nothing to do with Japan. So what's the problem? Why am I talking about this today? Well, there are still people who do this show, and not the recontextualized versions. Even this year, 2020, Noda recognised 2 actors in Yellowface as being the best leading actors in a Gilbert and Sullivan production for the Mikado, and posted on their Facebook page pictures of them in Yellowface. It's okay to still perform the Mikado, sure, but why does it need to be done in Yellowface in 2020? Is this something that we as white people should still be performing in Yellowface? Absolutely not. I don't know if or why or how anyone could argue that we should. And I'm also not saying that if you want to perform the Mikado, you should cast exclusively Asian people, because race isn't a plot point in this show. It's a satire of the British government. Who doesn't love one of those? And it's an important piece of British theatrical history. But we do not need to perform this show in Yellowface anymore. I would love to hear everyone's thoughts on this, because I'm also not in the business of thinking that I'm right about everything. But I do think this is important, and I think it's an important time to be talking about this, and I wanted to provide some education to people who didn't know this about the show. So, thanks. If you would like me to talk about some other musical theatre history, please let me know in the comments, because I love to do this. And quite frankly, I have nothing better to do with my day.